China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing.
Make sure that in national projects, Canadian steel and aluminum is used.
When people think about trade wars, they imagine factories roaring back to life and jobs flooding home. That was the promise. Protect domestic workers, punish foreign competition, make America stronger. But what if the opposite quietly happened? What if the same policies meant to defend American aerospace helped accelerate the rise of another country instead? Because when Boeing, the symbol of American aviation power, began shifting billion-dollar contracts toward Canada, it raised a question nobody expected. Who really paid the price? And the answer wasn't as simple as politics. Long before tariffs entered the conversation, Boeing was already under intense pressure. Quality concerns had been stacking up for years. Internal reviews multiplied. Trust, once taken for granted, became fragile. When CEO Dave Calhoun stepped down in late 2024 amid mounting scrutiny, many believed that marked the low point. But insiders would later suggest that resignation wasn't the end of Boeing's problems. It was the warning sign. Production delays were eating into margins. Labor relations were deteriorating. In St. Louis and Seattle, workers were exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly uncertain about the future. Strikes broke out. Contracts were slashed. Morale hit levels some veterans said they'd never seen before. And just as the company was struggling to regain stability, Washington made its move. Following his re-election, President Trump doubled down on the Made in America agenda. One of the first major actions was a sweeping set of tariffs targeting imported aerospace components. The idea was simple and powerful. If companies had to pay more for foreign parts, they'd be forced to bring production back home. Jobs would follow. Supply chains would become independent. Tariff rates reportedly ranged between 15 and 25%, covering everything from avionics, systems to fuselage structures, and auxiliary engines. On paper, it sounded like a decisive win for American workers. Supporters celebrated. Headlines praised the toughness. Political messaging dominated the news cycle. But behind the scenes, manufacturers were doing the math. And the numbers told a very different story. Just months after the tariffs took effect, Boeing made an announcement that stunned analysts. The company had signed major work package agreements with several Canadian aerospace firms. Reports estimated the value at more than $3 billion. The scope was massive. Commercial fuselage components, military avionics integration, long-term maintenance programs across multiple aircraft lines. At first glance, it looked like jobs were being exported north of the border. But the real surprise was where the work would actually happen. Not in Montreal, not in Toronto. Instead, production would take place inside newly leased facilities in Michigan and Ohio. American soil. Canadian contractors. That's when critics realized something unexpected had happened. Analysts say Boeing discovered a legal gray zone. Tariffs applied to imported goods, not to companies operating domestically. By contracting Canadian firms to manufacture within the United States, Boeing could sidestep tariff costs while reshaping its labor structure. The move gave Boeing flexibility it hadn't had before. Canadian aerospace firms could staff projects with engineers, earning noticeably lower average salaries than their American counterparts. Benefits packages were simpler. Regulatory obligations were lighter. From a corporate standpoint, it reduced cost pressure instantly. From a worker's perspective, it felt like a betrayal, and the reaction was swift. American labor unions didn't mince words. Leaders called the move a slap in the face to the people who built Boeing's legacy. In St. Louis, where thousands of workers had just returned from a grueling strike, morale collapsed almost overnight. Many families had worked for Boeing across generations. Parents trained their children. Skills were passed down with the expectation of stability. Now, that future looked uncertain, not because demand disappeared, but because the system around them changed. What made the situation even harder to swallow was the irony. These were the same regions that supported trade protection most strongly. The same voters who believed tariffs would shield their livelihoods. Instead, they were watching jobs quietly change hands. But while American workers were reeling, something very different was happening north of the border. Canada hadn't reacted to tariffs. It had prepared long before they existed. For nearly a decade, the Canadian government had been investing heavily in aerospace. Through programs like the Strategic Aerospace Innovation Fund, billions were poured into workforce training, advanced manufacturing, and applied research. The focus wasn't loud. It wasn't confrontational. It was methodical. Universities such as McGill, Toronto, and Waterloo built deep partnerships with industry. Research moved quickly from labs to production lines. Engineers were trained specifically for real-world aerospace challenges. Executives reportedly viewed Canada not just as technically capable, but politically predictable. In an era where supply chains were constantly disrupted, that stability became a competitive advantage. Some internal assessments, according to reports, even rated Canada higher than the United States in long-term policy reliability. For American industrial pride, that was a hard pill to swallow. The contrast between the two approaches couldn't have been sharper. In the US, tariffs delivered instant headlines and strong symbolism. But critics argue there was no detailed follow-through. No large-scale retraining programs, no coordinated push to modernize aging facilities, no productivity roadmap. Companies were pressured without being equipped. Canada, on the other hand, stayed quiet. It didn't challenge Washington directly. It focused on becoming indispensable, not cheaper, not louder, more reliable. And in a fractured global economy, reliability can be everything. The human impact of that shift is impossible to ignore. Just outside Boeing's main assembly hub, a veteran engineer, let's call him Jim, sits in his usual coffee shop. He's trained dozens of younger workers, including his own son. I taught him this trade, he says. Now I don't know if there's a future for it here. Jim's story isn't unique. Across Seattle, St. Louis, and other industrial cities, families are facing a new reality. Skills that once guaranteed stability are no longer enough on their own. Meanwhile, in Montreal, the mood is completely different. A recent engineering graduate received multiple job offers within weeks of Boeing's contract announcements. Companies were hiring so aggressively that wages jumped well above market averages. Universities expanded labs. Startups attracted record funding. Neighborhoods near industrial zones surged in value. A city that once lost talent to Silicon Valley was now attracting engineers from around the world. 2 countries, 1 industry, completely opposite trajectories. The political fallout was inevitable. Trump publicly criticized Boeing, accusing the company of turning its back on American workers. Threats of contract reviews followed. Democrats seized the moment to attack what they called short-sighted trade policy. Even within the Republican Party, lawmakers from industrial states began raising concerns. But amid all the noise, one question echoed louder than the rest. At a worker forum in Detroit, a welder stood up and asked, "If tariffs protect us, why does this feel like we're losing?" The room reportedly fell silent, because that question cut to the core of the issue. In Canada, the conversation was different. This wasn't just about employment, it was about identity. For the first time, one economics professor observed, we're not standing in America's shadow. We're standing beside it, not through confrontation, through preparation. The lesson unfolding in aerospace reaches far beyond Boeing. In today's global economy, power doesn't always belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to those who execute consistently, invest patiently, and offer stability when others offer chaos. Tariffs can change incentives, but they can't replace capacity, and that's the warning hidden inside this story. So where does this leave America? Can it rebuild competitiveness without relying on blunt tools? Can it match preparation with preparation rather than promise with promise? And has Canada quietly opened a new chapter in North American aerospace? That answer isn't written yet, but one thing is clear. The future of industry won't be decided by slogans alone. It will be decided by who learns faster and who adapts before the next shift arrives. Because Boeing's move wasn't the end of a story. It was the signal. A signal that in a changing world, trust, stability, and execution can matter more than tradition. And the real competition has only just begun. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective, share your thoughts below. Do tariffs still work in today's economy, or has the game fundamentally changed? And if you want more deep dives into global power shifts that don't make headlines, make sure to subscribe, because behind every policy decision are real families, real workers, and the future of entire industries. And those stories are never as simple as they seem.